Hi, everyone. Evan Alexander here. Hope your week is going well. Today, I want to talk a bit about post processing and how you can make your images look a little better once you get out of 3D. I've got 10 tricks for you today. Tips, tricks, maybe. Uh, some of them are really basic and some of them are a little more advanced. So hopefully there's something in here for everyone. So let's jump right in. We're going to start out inside of Cinema 4D here. And this first one is called ID Pass. We're going to use Corona Renderer today. Process will be a little bit different for other render engines, and we'll circle back to that. So I have this render here of this 1970s Camaro that I've been working on modifying the model of, having fun. And so this is kind of the current state of the beauty render. But what I'm able to do here is I'm also at the same time Corona is rendering for me this what we call an ID pass. So it's taking every single object that's in the scene and it's rendering it out as a kind of a flat field of color. And so this is great because it lets us in Photoshop go through with the magic wand and very easily come in here and select these objects without having to make complicated selections or using, the lasso tool or the magic lasso tool or, any of these kind of content aware filters. So this is great. It speeds up your editing so much. And it costs you no time inside of Cinema to kind of get this out. Cool, right? All right. So how do we do it? I have a scene here, which is this kind of Parisian dining room setup here. Pretty straightforward scene. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come to the Corona menu and I'm going to look for this thing right in the middle called Multipass. And when I hit this, a window will open up. So here's all the different passes you can have. And if you don't know anything about passes, I encourage you to do a little reading and a little digging around. It's powerful stuff that can really kind of help you. Today, we're going to keep it really simple. We're just going to render out this ID pass. So here's what I need to do. First, I need to click Enable just to turn on the multipass system. There's a gotcha. And then I literally just take this ID and I drag and drop it over here to add it to the scene. And that's it. Worth noting, though, if I click on ID, you'll see there are a bunch of different kinds of ID pass that you can set up. And I encourage you to experiment with this a little bit and see, which one kind of makes the most sense. Because you can actually sort by materials or geometry groups, instances. We'll keep it at instances today. And we'll try it out. Okay, so now I'm going to just hit render. And so this is going to jump us over to the picture viewer inside of Cinema here. It's preparing the scene here, and hopefully if all goes well here, this will start to render. Here we go. Okay, so here it is. It's rendering away. This is progressive rendering, right? So it just it spits out an image pretty quick, and then it keeps refining and refining, getting rid of more and more kind of noise as it samples and samples and samples all the light. Okay, so this is still cooking along here. Now we're looking in the history tab of our picture viewer, which shows us, basically a list of all of the different renders that we've done in this session of Cinema 4D. But there are these other tabs here that you may not have ever touched or played with. And we're looking for the one here that's called Layer. And as we come in here, so we're set to image, which means, we're seeing the overall beauty pass. And these are the different individual passes. So if I click over to single pass here, you can see that here's this ID pass, and it's starting to just drop in all of these kind of colors for us, which is very, very nice, right? So let's go back here and let's imagine that this is done rendering. It's not done rendering, but we'll imagine that it is. So we'll stop and denoising will run its, kind of process. So now I'm just going to save this out here, and I'm just going to save this as a PSD, a 16-bit PSD. That's my kind of usual here, and we'll, here we'll just call this dining. Here we'll call this shot 1. And we'll save this out. So now, without having to do any more rendering, I can switch now over to layer and hit single pass with ID. And now, same thing. Now that this is active, I can do just the same thing. File, save image as, and we'll save this also as PSD. If I hit the button here, and we'll call it the same name here. And I'm just going to add ID to the back. And that's it. That's all you have to do. It didn't take any more time than the actual kind of render did. So let's jump over into Photoshop here. And so I'm going to open up both of these files here at the same time. So now I've got here, we've got our beauty pass, and then here we have our ID pass. So let's switch over to the move tool. I'm just going to peel this tab off so we can see. And so now I'm just going to drag and drop this into the image. The secret, right, these are the same size. So the secret here is getting this kind of centered. So if I just drag and drop and let go, it's just going to drop itself anywhere that it wants to. So that's not great. Here's what you want to do. You want to click on this, drag, and now I'm going to hold down the Shift key. And by holding the Shift key when I let go of the mouse, what it's going to do is it's going to center what I'm dragging in. It's going to center it on the canvas. And since these two are, the exact same size, and now, we're sure that everything here is nice and lined up kind of perfectly. So that's great. So, all right, so let's look at this in action here. If I turn this on, and I'm going to grab my magic wand tool here. And now you can see if I just click on this, say, ornament detail, I get this nice, perfect selection here. And I can, edit this any way that we want. Or if we want to grab this lamp or this vase or, this chair here. And you don't need to get into these, kind of complicated selections. So this is great. We love this. All right. So let's keep moving here. Tip number 2, adjustment layers. So imagine that you want to come in here and do some kind of balance or tonal adjustments to this. Traditionally, we've gone up to, image adjust levels or curves or hue sat. We'll use levels here. And if I come in here and, kind of crush the blacks down, this is extreme, but you'll get it. And I say, okay, I've now done this in a destructive way, right? I've permanently altered these pixels. So if I were to work on this for another 20 minutes and then realize, I kind of made it too dark, there's no going back now, right? You can't undo. I mean, you can undo it, but you have to undo all of your work and the steps kind of leading up to that. So that's not great. Let's just undo here. There has to be a better way. And the better way is adjustment layers. So if we come down to the bottom of our layers menu here, there's this black and white circle. If I click on that, you're going to see here a menu of all the different adjustment layers that we have. So here, let's grab levels again and grab this. And so now it's made this own layer, right? It has a mask. It's showing everywhere by default. And here it is. So I can still come in and do the exact same thing that we just did. But now this is going to, live here. So if we come in here and, let's say we make a new layer and, let's grab a paintbrush here and, we're just going to, work on this and that's great. And, don't we love it? And you say, oh, the floor here is too dark. Just come back to this adjustment layer. And, at any time here, you can kind of set this to be the way that you want. So that is amazing, right? We love it. And so also, let's get rid of this black cloud of death here. This does have a mask to it, and by default, it's all white, so everything is showing. So if I were to click on the mask, you have to click on this little icon here to activate the actual adjustment layer. But if I click on the actual mask now, so if I were to paint with black, I could make that disappear, and or if I switch and paint with white here, I can make it kind of reappear. So, I can come in here and kind of choose with broad strokes here, but kind of where to, add this adjustment layer and where not to add this adjustment layer. So this leads us to tip number 3, which is called selections equal masks. And it's going to take everything we've talked about so far and kind of combine it together. So let's take a look. I'm going to turn on our ID pass again, go back to our magic wand tool, and I'm just going to grab this little ornament here over the archway, and I'll turn this off. Now, if you have a selection already going in Photoshop and then you make your adjustment layer, it's going to automatically use your selection to make a mask. So now I've added this layers adjustment mask, but it is automatically for me kind of clipped or masked to just this ornament. So I can come in here now and start to make this adjustment, and it's only going to affect that one piece of geometry. So if I use these things in conjunction, then we can, really be kind of smart and selective about how we do this. Let's do that again. So I'm going to grab this and, maybe this time we'll grab, what should we grab here? We'll grab the lamp here. So I'm going to grab the lamp, and then this time I'll make a, let's see, what do we do here? We'll do a brightness contrast. And so now this is masked just to that. So if I were to come in here with brightness, right, I can do this where I'm affecting only the lamp. So this is great because you don't want to come in and start doing all of these complicated selections. And so, if you start thinking about, video walls seen through truss or, trees with leaves and foliage, all these really complicated selections, using these passes and then using select to mask for your adjustment layers, it really lets you kind of dial in and drill down. Just be sure you name these so you can find them later. Learn how to spell better than me. And so, then you have all of this, kind of control. And in the end of the day, I end up with a whole bunch of these, and I'll just, Command G these into a new group, and we'll call this adjustments, and we'll keep all of this stuff together. So that's great. We love adjustment layers. And when you start pairing it with select to mask and then your ID pass, you've really got a lot of power to quickly come in and just, lighten up one part of the image or change the color of that, one pillow on the couch or, whatever you kind of need to do. Okay? So we love that because it's non-destructive and we love being non-destructive. Now, speaking of non-destructive, we talked about these adjustments and adjustment layers, but what about filters? And I don't use filters a ton, but I do use them sometimes, and they're kind of important for what we use. So let's say, for example, I want to come up here and just I'm just going to grab a Gaussian blur here, and let's say we want to come in here and blur our image out, or this layer. And so I'm going to say, okay. Now, again, similar to, that original level adjustment, this is destructive. And I've now, borked my pixels into this permanently kind of blurry state. And so I can't, short of undoing, I can't undo that. I can't, kind of tweak it or adjust it later. So that's not great because we like being, non-destructive. So I'm going to undo here. What we need is, and this is tip number 4, we need what's called smart filters. So here's how this works. I'm going to take the layer that we want to adjust here. This is our background layer. I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to choose Convert to Smart Object. And you'll see the icon changes a little bit here. Nothing else has changed over here. But now, if I were to come in here and let's say add a Gaussian blur here, and we'll just crank this up, and we'll say, okay. Now you can see that what it's done is it's added these kind of sub filters here, smart filter, and then inside of that is this Gaussian blur. So first things first, I can just turn this off or on, which is great. Already we're winning. But if I double click on this now, it's going to bring this back up and I can come in and I can adjust this. So this is great because it's going to let you do any kind of filtering, non-destructively. And you can stack these up. So now if I were to come in here and say, I don't know, let's say mosaic, isn't that great? I love it. This is definitely how to improve your renders. And you can see here now it's started to kind of stack these up. So, you can kind of play around with mosaic or Gaussian blur, right? And you're doing this, non-destructively so that you can turn them off. You can double click here and kind of, readjust if you want. You can also just right click and say delete smart filter and just get rid of that. So this just gives you so much more control. The other thing that's great is that any adjustments that you have made to this layer, whether it's your base layer or any other kind of layer, these can now be kind of transferred and moved. So if you were to go back to the 3D, maybe you alter the scene a little bit, change out the painting on the wall or, move something around. When you bring in your new JPEG, your new PSD, your new image, your new hero shot, I should say, you can just make it a smart object and then drag and drop all of these filters over to it. And then, you're right back to baseline without having to redo that whole process. So this is great. Please do this for everything. It will, as would make sense, it is going to bump up your file size because it's, it's now remembering a lot more kind of data. But I think it's really, absolutely, worth it. And this is going to lead us into tip number 5 here, which is called, let's not do that, which is called camera raw. Okay. This is my absolutely favorite filter. And usually the first thing that I do once I get an image in here. So this is already converted to a smart object. And now I'm going to say filter camera raw filter. And it'll take a sec here, and it's going to pop open a separate window. So here we are, and boy, look at all of these controls. So this is going to let you in one shot kind of go through and make a lot of adjustments. So instead of doing all these different individual kind of adjustment layers and, kind of filtering tweaks, this is going to let us do a lot of this at once. There's a ton in here. We're not going to go over all of it. A lot of these are all, kind of opening up other menus here for color mixer and curves and all that stuff. We'll just look at the basic real quick here, but really simply, like just right away dealing with the color, temperature, and the white balance of your image, just by kind of sliding this slightly over to the left here to kind of add in some more blue hue and kind of cool this off. Or if I bring this to the other direction, I can, kind of warm it up. I'll go a little too far just to kind of show so you can kind of see here, right? So you can really get in here and kind of adjust your color balance. A little goes a long way, okay? Don't overcrank it because it starts to look artificial really quickly. So you want to kind of stay in, in these kind of low numbers. But, if your rendering came out kind of cool or, your lighting was like not warm enough or it's too warm, this is going to help you kind of really adjust that, right? You can also control the greens and the magentas in here as well, and kind of add more red. So you can use these in conjunction with each other to really, if you want to really kind of purple this out, or you can go crazy. Again, be subtle, right? A little goes a long way. And then you've got, some more kind of straightforward things, just like general exposure and contrast, which is nice. You do now have control over like highlights, shadows, your whites and blacks. And this is great because, maybe I want to bump up the exposure, but my whites here look like they're burning out a little bit. So, we can kind of pull our highlights down a little bit, maybe pull our white tones down a little bit. Maybe your, black tones aren't deep enough or your shadows aren't kind of rich enough here. You can really start to kind of crush and play around with this a little bit. So play around with all of this stuff, but it's as my first step of getting out of 3D and into Photoshop, I always come in, convert to smart object, and I run this, and then again, because it's a smart object, you can see here I kind of warmed it up a little bit, and at any time I can just double click on this. It's going to think for a second here, but it's going to take me back, and then we're right back where we started, and we can make more adjustments. If you want to kind of bring down the exposure but really warm it up, great, you can do that, and you're good to go. Okay, so camera raw tip number 5, it's a great one. All right, I'm going to pause here for a second, update our files, and we'll be back in 1 sec. All right, so here we are with a completely different setup here. I've got this render here of an interior, just like a little detail inside of a kind of loft space. And then I've brought in this kind of, grippy, grungy, kind of JPEG on top of it. And so I want to talk now about blending modes. So I touched on this a bit in the volumetric light tutorial, but I want to throw this in here because it's a big part of Photoshop. So I've got this layer here. We'll just, let's go ahead and name this grunge. And this sitting on top of this other layer. So by default here, these are the blending modes. It's set to normal, which just means we're seeing this just kind of as it is. But there's a huge array of different modes here, and what's going on is the different blending modes, they affect how this layer is going to blend, I know you're shocked, with the layers that are below it and behind it and underneath it. So some of these I use all the time. Some of them I've never used. And I wish I could say that I knew what every single one did. But you'll have to do a little bit of kind of investigating into this. But you'll see here as we start to, kind of go through the different options, it's going to give you a preview here of all these, kind of different ways. Some of them are, like linear light is a little bit harsher than, like soft light or, even hard light and soft light are going to give you different effects, based on what you, want to do. So, if I wanted to kind of grunge up this wall a little bit here, I might set this to, well, let's go with hard light. But then, of course, you can always kind of also play around with the, with the opacity of it a little bit. So, please do a better job than I'm doing here, right? Use your ID pass, mouse out the wall, and, you can start to come in here and, and be really, kind of subtle with this. But, you could start to get this effect, and and maybe hard light isn't right. Maybe maybe overlay is what you want with like more opacity, right? And you can tweak this all day if you want to. But it's important to know that these are kind of there. So I want to talk specifically about 2 of these, which are really good and helpful here. Let's get rid of this grunge layer here. If I were to let me just grab some, where is, let's see here, black and white. Somewhere in here I have black and white patterns. Where is it? Here we go, patterns, black and white. So let's grab, we'll grab this guy. And we'll just move this in here. And let's go ahead and just make it real big here so we can see. So if I were to set this blending mode to multiply, what happens is basically any part of the image that's pure white is going to disappear. And I'm going to be left with the black parts of the image. So this can be super handy depending on what you're doing. Keeping in mind that the grayscale values in between will give you varying levels of opacity. So multiply is a really good one. The other one we use a lot is called screen. Screen will do the opposite of that, where the black parts of our image will disappear and the lighter and whiter and grayer parts of it will stay. So I call these 2 out specifically because we use these a lot in kind of performance rendering, like say, for example, if you're doing lighting for a concert, right? So here I have just this kind of basic, stage setup here, nothing really fancy. And then we have this kind of beam of light. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drag this guy in to the scene here. Let's see here. Where is it? Here it is. And it's probably enormous. It is enormous. Let's go ahead and shrink this guy down a little bit. And so now you can see here that we've got this light in here, but it's on a black background, and it's kind of just covering up all the stuff that we, want to see here. So if I come in here and I change this blending mode to screen, all of the black parts of the image kind of go away. And what we're left here now with is just the lighter, kind of bits. So this is great because it lets us, kind of on these lighting, kind of beams and flare files, it lets us just get rid of, kind of all of the blackness, that's kind of inside of it. So that's great. Okay. So we've added this in. And so now let's talk about tip number 7 here, which is called clipping masks. So I've got this red light, but now if you want to make this light a different color, you could just, do a hue saturation change to it. But, since we like to be non-destructive, what we want to do is we want to add in a hue saturation adjustment layer to this. And so, if I were to hit colorize and let's up the saturation and, kind of move the slider around. So here, great. Now I've made the light into this kind of yellowy, kind of orange-ish green kind of look, which is great. However, as you can see, here's the problem. It's affecting everything, right? So what's happening is I've got this hue saturation layer on top of our light layer. And that's great because it's doing what we want, but it's also affecting everything underneath it, which we don't want. So if we add what's called a clipping mask, we can make it so that this layer will only affect this layer, okay? There's 2 different ways that we can do it. So here's the first one. I'm going to select this hue saturation layer. I'm going to go ahead and, oh, no, it's not there. Where is it? Here, under properties. Sorry. I'm going to select this hue saturation, and I'm going to come up to its properties, right? So here we can dial this in. And at the very bottom here, there's this first icon here, which says click to clip to layer. So if I hit this button right here, you'll see that what it's going to do is going to add this little sideways kind of arrow going over and down. So now this hue sat is only affecting the layer underneath it. And right, so now we can play with this all day long. It's non-destructive, so I can come back to it later if I want to, lower my saturation or increase my saturation. But it's now clipped to only affect this. So let's undo that again. So you can see now it's affecting everything. So the other way to do this is to hold down the Alt key, and as soon as you move your mouse on the line in between these 2 layers, you get this little icon that kind of looks like the icon for clipping. And so now, holding the Alt key, if I click right here, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to go ahead and clip this to the layer. And so that's great, right? And so anywhere we move this around, this will kind of come with it. And then, we can come in here and we can really, kind of play with this a little bit. Now, I'll notice that, I have some level adjusting to do to this as well. So I've got this layer, layer 9, which is our light here. Let's call this light. And then this layer is clipped to it. If I select the light layer, if I were to now add another adjustment layer to this, without even worrying about the clipping mask, because I'm making this new layer in between the layer and the clipping mask, Photoshop is automatically going to assume that I want this one to clip to this as well, which is super convenient because we do. And so now if I come in here and start to, kind of adjust and dial in the settings for this, Now, so you can clip um, multiple adjustment layers to this one, kind of object. So that's great. We love this. So between using blending modes here and then using clipping masks on adjustment layers, see how a lot of this stuff kind of, overlaps and weaves together? This gives us a ton of control over adding in things like lighting or doing, big color shifts and stuff, to different scenes. So this is great. All right. Voila. Our scene has changed again. Are you still with me? We're getting there. This is tip number 8. It's called Quick Mask. And it has absolutely nothing to do with clipping masks or layer masks or any other masks, except that it has the word mask in it. This is great for helping you make selections and kind of cutting things out. So let's say that we want to put this guy into this scene. So the first thing we need to do is cut him out. Now he's on a white background, which is going to make our lives much easier than, a lot of other cutout jobs, but still, kind of not perfect. So let's just grab the magic wand here. You can see already that it's not really, kind of doing a perfect job of it all here. And so I feel like I have it kind of close. So that's our selection. Now I'm going to invert our selection so that we're just grabbing the guy inverse here. And so, there you go. But now it's hard to tell exactly what's going on here. And, I feel like if I were to cut him out, which we do by hitting Command J, Control J, right? This is going to be new, where is it here? New layer via copy, Control J. You'll see that let's see here, if we throw in kind of a black background, can we see? Yeah, you can see that it didn't really do a great job of it, right? There's a big hole in his wrist here, and I've got all this kind of fringing and, other stuff going on. So, there must be a better way. So let's do that again here. Well, we'll select the background, and then we'll inverse the background. Now, here's what we're going to do. We're going to turn on what's called quick mask mode. It's this little button over here that is right below the foreground and background color. And the shortcut is Q. So when I hit this, what you'll see is now everything that I have selected has turned this red kind of overlay. And you can see, right, we've got some weird fringing here, and we've missed some spots on his collar. Overall, things don't look kind of great. So what I like to do is I come into quick mask mode here, and now I can grab a paintbrush, and with black and white, I can either, if I paint with white, I believe I will delete from the selection. And if I paint with black, I will add to it. So I can come in here now with this brush. I'm using a hard brush, and I'm at 100% opacity. And I can just come in here and I can start to, kind of patch up some of these holes here. And we can come in here and, kind of paint, in, or we can switch over and, kind of get rid of some of these and kind of clean up the idea. So this is how I, usually kind of cut people out. I mean, there's a lot of different ways in Photoshop to cut people out. And, some people, and if you go too far, just switch over and come back and, kind of paint it in. Some people like to use the pen tool. Some people like to use the kind of auto selection tool. There's no right or wrong here, but this is great. And then if you hit Q, you can kind of jump back in. Now if, for example, if you wanted this suit, but, you didn't want his head for some reason, you could come in here into quick mask mode and, just, kind of, let's just paint out his head. Obviously, please be careful and do a much better job than I'm, kind of doing here. But I can come in and let's just get rid of this. I'm hitting the X key, by the way, just to toggle between my foreground and background color. And so that's great because it lets you on the fly come in here and, just kind of add and take away from your selection. So I'm hitting X to switch colors, and I'm using the bracket keys to make my brush kind of larger and kind of smaller along the way. Anyway, you get the idea here. Do a better job than I'm doing. And then I hit Q to jump out of quick mask mode. And there we go. Now, we've got this all kind of selected the way that we want. So it's a minor tip, but quick mask is great. If you just need to touch up, this thing, really quickly, just jump over here, grab a good brush. Whoop, don't do that. And come in here and kind of get rid of some of this stuff here, okay? So quick mask is great. And then once you have it selected, again, it was layer, new, layer via copy, Control or Command J. And what that's going to do is it's going to pop everything that you've kind of selected out, onto its own, kind of layer. So I have this guy here already, kind of done and cut out. So now I'm going to grab him and I'm just going to drag and drop him right into this scene here. Let's hit Command T to transform. I'm just going to eyeball his scale here a little bit. Please be more scientific in your work. All right, so here we have him in here, and outside of the fact that he doesn't have any shadows, overall, he doesn't really fit into the scene very well, and I see this a lot because he's being lit, in a photographer's studio with, very clearly some kind of like overhead front light and some strong light kind of coming in from here. The environment that he's in, though, is not that at all. He's got this overhead kind of strong light behind him, right? So he looks really like unnatural. And we can do adjustments and, adjustment layers to kind of get him in. But here's how I was taught to kind of put people in. And it's really great because it has to do more with the value than it has to do with like the colors or even the lighting. So here's what we're going to do to make him kind of fit in, okay? So here's our layer. We'll just call this man. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add an adjustment layer, and there's one here called black and white. So I'm just going to throw this on here. And what that's going to do is that's going to just instantly give us, grayscale for the whole image so that we can really focus on the value instead of the color. So that's great. This is just temporary. We're going to just get rid of this in a minute. So now for the man, I'm going to add a levels adjustment layer. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to clip this right to the man. And so now, so we always play around with levels, but here I want you to use this bar on the bottom. And what this is doing is it's kind of controlling the range of like black or white, kind of the overall, kind of value of the image. Separate from, kind of like our highs, our lows, and our mid-tones here. Please read more about levels in Photoshop if you want to fully understand what's going on. So now, though, if I come in here and if we start to adjust this, and here's the thing I do that seems kind of weird, and my students always think I'm crazy, but I squint at the image because it just helps you to, kind of play around with your vision a little bit. And so what you want to do is you want to kind of try to dial this in so that the value feels more like he naturally is kind of sitting in the scene in a better, kind of way. And then I'm going to turn off the black and white. And already you can see, he's still not perfect, but already you can see this is what he came in as. And this is now kind of where he's at. And while he doesn't look totally natural because we haven't added shadows and, kind of highlights, maybe a little like rim light on his shoulders, brighten up his face a little bit, we can do all of that. But just in general, tonally, he's sitting in a much better place inside the image. And so that's my first step. And it's just easier to do in black and white here where you're really kind of playing around, obviously if you go too far, you can do damage, and now it's just kind of working against you, in the other way. But so don't be afraid of these sliders. I'm sorry, I don't even actually know what they're called, but check it out. All right. That's tip number 9. And then our final and last tip here. You've made it this far. If you're still here watching this video, thank you. This is a long one, people. All right, let's talk about LUTs. What did he say? LUTs, lookup tables. So, when you post on Instagram and then right before you post, they ask you if you want to add all these filters, like, I can't remember what they're called, Nashville, or this is the kind of Photoshop version of that, or I should say, Instagram filters are kind of the Instagram version of lookup tables. So what the heck are we talking about? All right, here's our scene. You know what? Let's just get rid of this dude because he's kind of freaking me out. And we don't need our black and white anymore. So let's delete that. So we're going to come back again to adjustment layers. And this time we're going to grab what's called color lookup. It's going to add an adjustment layer. And so now Photoshop comes with a bunch of LUTs. You can also find them on the web and, add them to your scene or add them to your menu here. So what is this? Well, here's the ones that come kind of default. And, some of them make sense, like crisp winter or, fall colors. Some of them are more kind of dialed into, specific film or camera companies, like you'll see Kodak here and Fuji. So if I were to just click on, say, crisp warm there, you can see right away that what's happening is, it's adjusting the overall tonality. It's like a preset adjustment for your scene kind of put in here. So crisp warm, or, if we were to try something like fall colors here, you can see it gets kind of smoky, and maybe you want that effect, maybe you don't. If I come in here for like these Fuji ones, you can see this really, it's adjusting the contrast. It's kind of tinting things kind of blue. So it's almost like we're using the camera raw filter, but it's kind of a predefined filter here. And, this is the first Fuji. The second Fuji one looks absolutely different. And, so you can play around with these. I try to, take kind of a light touch with these. Now, you can't adjust the individual properties of these, but you can lower the overall opacity of this, lookup, this LUT adjustment layer, so that you can kind of control, the strength of it a little bit. And so, again, be careful. You don't want to go too crazy. And, some of these are really nice. Like I like this. It gives you this, kind of matrix, kind of greenish, kind of tension green feel to the whole thing. Some of these like night from day are just, trash, and like, please don't use them. So you have to kind of play around with it a little bit and kind of see, what works well. Film stock looks pretty nice, but maybe it's burning out my lights a little bit. So again, this has its own mask to it. And so I could come in here with a soft brush at, like 50% opacity here and, start to kind of, paint this out. Or, again, use your ID pass, if we had one here, and, make these, selections, and, you can kind of be a little more selective in, where this kind of lookup table is happening. All right, that's it. Woo, we made it, people. How long is this video? I don't even know. But thank you so much for tuning in. Please comment down below if there's other things you want to see, if you want to cover here. I'm having fun making these tutorials. We're kind of bouncing all over the place, but, expand your knowledge. Try it out. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you in another one real soon.